Right then, not enough Japan in that last video? Well, get ready, for today we're going to be taking a little look at everyone's favourite Japanese light tank, the Type 95 Hara. If you'd rather not know anything about this fascinating little vehicle and instead just watch some things explode, then fear not! I've catered for your needs as well by providing you with a timecode in the video description where you can skip all the talky bits and go straight to the shooty. For the rest of us, let's put on our EM/NCO hats, strap on our Type 94 Nambus, and try to cram a katana into the turret of the tank as we take a little look at the history of the Type 95 Hara.
How much history can this tiny thing possibly have?
As with most of these videos, first we must go way back to just after the First World War. Japan didn't really have anything to do with tanks during that particular conflict, but afterwards, much like most industrialized nations at the time, decided to mechanize its cavalry forces with armored fighting vehicles. Initially, they experimented with armored cars, but found that they were unsuited for operation on the muddy roads of Manchuria. Therefore, it was decided that the mechanized cavalry should be equipped with tanks. To begin with, Japan purchased a Tank Mark IV from Britain on October 1918, and later in 1919 a number of medium tank Mark A Whippets and Renault FT-17s. The Japanese modified the Whippets by adding additional hatches. These were tested until 1922 when they were scrapped. The Renault FTs were designated as Type 79 Kogata and used for training at the Army Infantry School and the Army Cavalry School. A modernized version of the Renault FT-17, the NC-1, was acquired by Japan in 1929. These were used operationally in Manchuria in 1932 and later during the occupation of French Indochina in 1940, where they even managed to find spare parts for these 11-year-old tanks. What became of the Mark IV tank is unknown. In 1925, the Imperial Japanese Army established a dedicated armoured force. Although competing with the Imperial Japanese Navy, who had priority over the army in terms of resource procurement, a team of engineers led by Major Tomio Hara began to design an indigenous Japanese tank. The finished product, the Type 87 Chi, was completed in February 1927, but was deemed too large, too slow, and too heavy for use as a cavalry tank. I will go further into the history of that particular vehicle during the Type 95 Rogo video, coming eventually. After issuing the design team with a revised specification for a lighter tank weighing around 9 metric tons, the Imperial Japanese Army received a vehicle based on the British medium Mark C, an example of which had been procured by the IJA in March 1927. This vehicle, although adopted as the Type 89 Igo or Chi-Ro, prompted the IJA to request something smaller still and much more mobile. It was around this time that the IJA purchased 10 Renault NC-1s, improved versions of the FT-17s, from France, and accepted them into service as the Type 79 Otsugata Sensha. In addition to these, Japan purchased a few Vickers 6-ton tanks and Carden Lloyd tankettes from Britain in order to provide Tomio Hara's tank design team with lighter vehicles to base their new concepts on. The first concept that they came up with was a funny little vehicle called the Sumida Amphibious Armoured Car, or AMP. This particular sort of half-track boat thing was tested in 1930, where it was decided to develop it into a fully tracked vehicle. This vehicle, although fully tracked, was named the Type 92 Junsokosha Heavy Armoured Car. This was to get around a political mandate set by the Imperial Japanese Army that dictated that only the infantry could have tanks, whereas the Type 92 was intended for the cavalry. The same phenomenon occurred in the United States, where, during the development of the M1 light tank, that vehicle had to be renamed as the M1 Combat Car to allow it to be used by the cavalry. The Type 92 armoured car, although really it was a tankette, was produced from 1932 to 1939, although only 167 examples were built due to ongoing technical issues, especially concerning the suspension. The Type 92 came in three main variants: the Type 92 Early, which was the initial production variant and took part in the Battle of Harbin, Manchuria in 1932, the Mid, which replaced the 6.5mm Type 91 machine gun in the hull with a 13mm Type 92 Heavy machine gun, a licensed-produced version of the Hotchkiss M1929, as well as adding another Type 91 on an anti-aircraft mount, which saw action during the Battle of Rehe in China in 1933, and the Late, which featured improvements to the suspension, replacement of the 6.5mm Type 91 machine gun in the turret with a 7.7mm Type 97, and featured newly designed vision slits. This last version was the one used during the Second World War, primarily in Manchuria. In 1933, the IJA decided that they needed a tankette that was better than the Type 92, and so commissioned the Tokyo Gas and Electricity Industry, which we know today as Hino Motors, to design one. What they came up with in 1934 was the Type 94 tankette, a tiny thing with one Type 91 machine gun in a turret. 823 Type 94s were built from 1935 to 1938, and they operated rather successfully in China in the roles of infantry support, reconnaissance, and as light ammunition tractors. For this last role, they were equipped with a tracked trailer. These were superseded in 1936 by the Type 97 Teke, which, while still a tankette, sported a 37mm Type 94 gun in its turret. This particular vehicle, I think, would make a very good battle rating 1.3 or even 1.7 scout tank, by the way, Gaijin. The tankette concept worked relatively well in China. They were fast, allowing them to travel the long distances involved when traversing such a large country. In fact, one particular vehicle, the Type 95 Soki tankette, was designed to be able to run on rails using retractable steel wheels. This allowed it to patrol the long stretches of railroad track utilized by the Japanese invasion forces in order to guard them against partisans. The Japanese tankettes were also very small, allowing them to be used very effectively in the reconnaissance role. The fact that they had very thin armor and tended to be armed only with machine guns was not an issue, as the Chinese forces they opposed were very rarely able to field any kind of armor or anti-tank weaponry at all. Against a swarm of Chinese infantry, a Type 94 tankette armed with a single machine gun is perfectly adequate. However, the Imperial Japanese Army realized that all these tankettes, even the Type 97 Teke with its 37mm gun, would be largely ineffective against any enemy armed with tanks of their own, especially the Soviet Union, which had been looking to regain its territories in Manchuria that Japan had taken from Imperial Russia in 1904. Although the Type 89 Igo was a little more capable in this respect, it was still regarded as too slow, and its primary weapon, a 57mm Type 90 gun, was a low-velocity piece more suited to blowing up infantry and fortifications with high explosives. The heavy tank projects only compounded these problems, and so the Imperial Japanese Army requested that a new tank be developed, one fast enough to act as a cavalry tank and keep up with mechanized infantry using trucks, as well as being able to engage enemy infantry and tanks. And so a Japanese trade delegation went over to the west, where they studied vehicles such as the Cardon-Lloyd tankette, the American Christie tank, and the various French cavalry tanks then in production, such as the Hotchkiss H-35 and the AMR series of reconnaissance tanks. Meanwhile, Major Tomio Hara, the mastermind behind much of Japanese tank design up until that point, patented a new suspension design, one that would be used by nearly every subsequent Japanese tank. This was the bell-crank scissor-type suspension, featuring two bogies, each with two road wheels, attached to two scissor levers, each of which was attached to the other via a coil spring inside a long tube. This suspension system was simple, cheap, reliable, and effective, and thus was selected for the new tank. Work began on a prototype in 1933 and was completed in June 1934. Although the vehicle worked well enough during the initial trials at the Sagami Arsenal, the Army decided that it was too heavy. Despite this, by the winter of that year, a new prototype weighing a full ton less than its predecessor, being 6.5 tons instead of 7.5, was ready for service trials in Manchuria. A year later, in November 1935, the tests were complete and the new vehicle, designated as Type 94 Hara, was ready to be put into production. However, the infantry branch of the Imperial Japanese Army was concerned that the tank's armour was too thin. The cavalry branch pointed out that the Type 95's speed and manoeuvrability made up for its poor armour. Besides, the only alternatives were the Type 89 I-Go, which had just as thin armour but was significantly slower, or the Types 92 and 94 tankettes, which had very limited anti-armour capabilities. The Type 97 was not yet in production. And so the infantry relented, and production of the Type 95 Hara light tank began in 1936. Initial production was carried out by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, but as only 100 had been built by 1939, the Japanese army brought in a bunch of other manufacturers to speed up production. These included the Sagami and Kokura arsenals, Nugata Tekosho, Kobe Saikosho, and Hitachi Industries. This meant that, by the time production ended in 1943, around 2,300 had been built, more than any other Japanese armoured fighting vehicle of the war. The Type 95 was first used in China, where it proved very effective, even against the few Vickers Mark E's, Panzerkampfwagen I, and CV-33s that the Chinese National Revolutionary Army had managed to scrape together. At this time, the Hara was considered one of the best tanks in the world. This opinion was shattered, however, during the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in July 1939. Here it was that Japanese tanks, mostly Type 95s and Type 89s, first encountered other modern battle tanks in the field, when the 3rd and 4th Tank Regiments of the IJA's 1st Tank Corps, led by Colonel Tamada Yoshio, launched an attack against a line held by Soviet BT-5 and BT-7 light tanks. Although this initial attack was a success, the Japanese forces launching a surprise attack at night during a thunderstorm up a hill down which the Russian tanks could not depress their guns, over the course of the conflict it soon became apparent that the BT tanks were superior to the Type 95. This was mainly due to the fact that the 45mm gun that the Soviet tanks were armed with were effective against the Japanese armour out to a distance of 1 kilometre, whereas the Japanese 37mm could only kill a BT-7 below a range of 700 metres. Not only that, the Soviet tanks were equipped with very powerful gasoline engines which, although made them more susceptible to catching fire than their Japanese diesel counterparts, made the BTs much faster than the Hagos. When Japan entered the Second World War in December 1941, it was still equipped primarily with the Type 95. Despite being largely inferior to their main opponent in these opening months, the American M3 and M3A1 light tanks, the IJA still enjoyed significant successes during their invasions of Burma, Malaysia, Singapore and the Philippines. Even by August 1942, during the attack on New Guinea, the Type 95 still was effective against the Australian troops. However, this may not have been the case had the Australians' primary anti-tank weapon on the island, the Grenade Hand Anti-Tank No. 74, also known as the Sticky Bomb, failed to stick to the Japanese tanks due to the tropical humidity. The few Type 95s from the 11th Tank Regiment also hold the distinction of being the only tanks from a foreign rival ever to land on North American soil when they were deployed as part of the Japanese occupation of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. By the time of the Battle of Guadalcanal, however, the Type 95 Hara was beginning to show its age. Although the US Marines attacking the island could only field a few M2A4 light tanks from the 1st Tank Battalion, a tank that was roughly similar in capabilities to the venerable Hara, the Americans succeeded in taking the island. The story of the Type 95 from then onwards is one of horribly outclassed and outnumbered tanks desperately being used in any way they could against a vastly superior Allied force from one island to the next. Even when used as static pillboxes or in suicidal banzai charges, the Type 95 Hargo was simply no match for the Mark II Matildas, M5 Stuarts, M3 Lees and M4 Shermans now fielded by the Allies. Even the infantry could relatively easily deal with the Type 95s. Not only was the M1 bazooka rocket launcher made available from the summer of 1942, the Hargo could be effectively immobilized even with small arms fire. The ventilation louvres on the side of the engine deck could be pierced by any standard service rifle, damaging the relatively fragile engine underneath. And the covers for the oil and fuel reservoirs were easily removed, allowing attacking infantry to very quickly set the tank ablaze. In addition, the Browning M2 HP heavy machine gun mounted on many of the American vehicles could easily penetrate the frontal armour of the Hargo at quite a distance. As the Americans fought from island to island in the Pacific and the Commonwealth forces defeated the IJA in Burma and India, the number of Type 95s was whittled down to the point that by the time the United States began landing on Okinawa in April 1945, 13 Type 95 Hargos and 14 Type 97 Shinhoto Chihas, 27 tanks in all, and all that was left of the Imperial Japanese Army's 27th Tank Regiment, were required to oppose the 800 or so Shermans that the US Army and Marine Corps had brought with them. When the Soviet Union rifle-stomped into the remaining parts of Manchuria that Japan occupied, the Type 95 encountered not only T-34-85s and IS-2 tanks, but possibly even the brand new IS-3, although reports of this are unconfirmed. The last use of the Type 95 Hargo by the Imperial Japanese Army was when a few were sent to oppose the Soviet forces landing on the Kuril Islands, where they were quickly destroyed by anti-tank guns. There are a few different variants of the Type 95 Hargo, some of which, such as the amphibious Type 2 Ka-Mi, also feature in War Thunder, and so they shall be discussed in their respective videos. The initial production version of the Type 95 Hargo, subsequently identified as the early version, denotes the first 100 Type 95s produced until 1937. This version differed from the main production variant, the one we have in War Thunder, by featuring an earlier and slightly less powerful 37mm gun and 6.5mm Type 91 machine guns instead of the later version's 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns. The very first Hargos were also powered by the 110 horsepower engine from the Type 89 Igo, making them 5 km per hour or 3 miles per hour slower than the main production variants. Another interesting variant was the Type 95 Hargo Hokuman, or Manchuria model. In Manchuria, the Japanese forces discovered that the tough sorghum grass that grew there was getting trapped in the Hargo's suspension and damaging it. To rectify this issue, Japanese engineers took the road wheel bogies and turned them upside down so that the apex of the V pointed towards the ground. They also added little tiny road wheels between the main road wheels. These changes helped keep the nasty sorghum grass away from the gubbins of the tank's suspension. The only other major modification of the Hargo was the Type 4 K-Nu. This tank featured the turret from the early Type 97 Chi-Ha, with the low-velocity 57mm gun, many of which became available after the Chi-Ha was upgraded to the Shinhoto variant. So the surplus turrets were stuck onto Hargos, turning them into Type 4 K-Nus. Around 100 such conversions were made, and the K-Nu was used as an infantry support tank in Okinawa and Manchuria, as well as being stationed on Kyushu Island. One final production variant of the Hargo was the Type 2 Ri-Ki armoured recovery vehicle. 12 were built in 1943, and although capable of towing most production Japanese tanks, they were spread far too thin to have any real impact. In 1944, a prototype of the Hargo was built featuring a high-velocity 47mm gun in a redesigned turret similar to that installed on the Type 98 K-Ni. It was determined that this tank was too cramped for its crew, and it never made it past field tests. The last two proposed versions of the Hargo were the Type 4 Ho-To and the Type 5 Ho-Ru. The former was a self-propelled gun armed with the Type 38 120mm howitzer in an open superstructure. The latter was a tank destroyer armed with the same Type 1 47mm anti-tank gun installed in the Shinhoto Chi-Ha. Only one prototype of each was completed towards the end of the war. In addition to the Imperial Japanese Army, a few other countries operated the Type 95 Hargo. Thailand purchased 50 Type 95s from Japan in 1940, which were later used by the Thai forces fighting in Burma. After the war, Thailand continued to operate the Type 95 until 1952, when most were decommissioned, although a single example is still marked as an operational unit in the Thai military's inventory, most likely used as a ceremonial vehicle. A lot of Hargos were left over in China after Japan's surrender in 1945. These were quickly seized by the National Revolutionary Army and the People's Liberation Army, and often fought against each other, along with other former Japanese tanks, during the Chinese Civil War. The last operator of the Type 95 Hargo was, oddly enough, France. In 1946, at the start of the First Indochina War, the French forces were forced to scrape together whatever armour they could against the Viet Minh. A ragtag collection of Ford trucks, Renault UE Chenelet tankettes, and 11 Type 95 Hargos left over from the Japanese occupation formed the unit known as the Commando Blindé du Cambodge, Cambodge, or Cambodia Armoured Commando. And now let's take a little look at the Type 95 Hargo inside the wonderful world of War Thunder.
Hey, look at it, it's so tiny, it's so cute and tiny, it's a tiny little thing.
Alright then, so here we have the Type 95 Hargo here in the world of War Thunder here. And look at it there. Isn't it lovely? It's a little bit odd looking, but you know, if it works, then what's wrong with it? Although, whether or not it works is up to debate. Right, I've got some scripted stuff to get through first before we can go talking freely, flowingly, you know, or improv-like. Anyway, so here we go with the script. That's the piece of paper I'm reading. Alright, so the Type 95 Hargo in War Thunder is a Tier 1, Battle Rating 1 reserve light tank of the nation of Japan. It says so up here. It has a crew of 3. One moment here. There they are. The Commando, who also acts as the gunner and loader in the one-man turret. So there he is there. It's stand up, doesn't get a seat to sit on. It must be uncomfortable. The driver, who sits in the hull on the right, because the Japanese drive on the correct side of the road. And the hull machine gunner, who sits to the driver's left, and all he gets to do is operate this machine gun, because as far as I can tell, he can't really reach the ammunition back here to pass it up to the gunner, commander, and he doesn't get a radio to play with, so all he does, he uses a machine gun, and that's it. The fuel tank and the radiator are in the back, along with the 120 horsepower or 88 kilowatt Mitsubishi A6120 VD straight 6 diesel engine, where they ought to be. So here they are, there's the fuel tank, there's the radiator, and there is the diesel engine, which means it should, theoretically, not catch fire quite as often. However, the transmission is in the front, connected to the engine via a drive shaft running underneath the fighting compartment, so this thing here. Which means that, if shots going in from the side are likely to damage the transmission. The transmission itself consists of 6 forward gears and 1 reverse gear, allowing the tank to reach a maximum speed of 48 kilometers per hour, or 30 miles per hour going forwards, and 5 kilometers per hour or 3 miles per hour in reverse. It sort of says it up here, I think. Yeah, 48 kilometers per hour. Well, I tested it myself, and indeed, 48 kilometers per hour. On level ground, the Hargo has a cruising speed of around 40 kilometers per hour, or 25 miles per hour. This is all pretty much bog standard in regards to the other tanks in this tier. Not too fast, not too slow. It does, however, turn very quickly, provided you are in the correct gear, so if you want to turn around or something, shove it up into third. The armour, however, leaves something to be desired. The thickest armour on the tank, the gun mantlet, is 30mm thick, so there it is there, that tiny little square of armour. The turret and hull are both 12mm all round, so 12mm. That's the upper closest. We'll worry about that in a moment. Apart from the rear of the hull, which is 10mm thick. The roof of the turret and hull vary between 9mm and 6mm thick, so beware aeroplanes. They can probably get through this armour with not much effort. Incidentally, the engine air intake on the right side of the hull should be thinner than 12mm, but that is not modelled in War Thunder, so this little louver here could be pierced with an infantry rifle, so it should be thinner. The primary armament consists of a single semi-stabilised 37mm Type 94 gun in the turret, for which you get 119 rounds of only one shell type, the Type 94 armour-piercing high-explosive shell. This shell has 29mm of penetrative capability at 500 meters, which is good enough to deal with most of the vehicles you'll encounter at this level, although they are susceptible to bouncing off even slightly sloped or angled surfaces, and French tanks will definitely pose a problem. However, each shell is filled with 13 grams of TNT, which means that although TNT isn't the best high explosive, it will do some damage if the shell gets inside the enemy tank. You get 13 shells in the ready racks in the turret, so these shells up here, they are the ready racks. Not that that's modelled on this particular tank, but maybe in the future. And the rest are mostly here, some of them here, but mostly here. As usual, I'd recommend only carrying around 30 shells at the most, because that's all you'll ever really need, especially in this tank. You usually die before you've fired 10. Anyway, secondary armament consists of a single 7.7mm Type 97 machine gun in a ball mount in the hull front, so here it is, operated by the machine gunner, for which you get 3,000 rounds of ammunition in 20-round box magazines. You also get this one back here, but you can't use it, unfortunately. It's annoying. Incidentally, in World War II, this tank was designed, this machine gun sticking out the back like this in a funny sort of angle, because the tank was supposed to be switched between firing the main gun and firing the machine gun. So if for example, you're going up against a bunch of infantry, the Commando would crank the turret round so that this gun is firing forwards, this one's sticking out to the side, and use the machine gun. Most other nations in the world got around this problem by sticking the machine gun next to the main gun, so you don't have to crank it round every time you spot a different kind of target. The gun is okay, not great. Relatively low velocity and poor penetration, but it does fire APHE rounds and reloads somewhat quickly, which is nice. You don't get a coaxial machine gun, which is annoying, but the hull machine gun is better than nothing. Indeed. Now for a live demonstration, we'll hand over to Live Kittelot. Right, so here we are driving around in Kursk with a Japanese tank. There you can see how I've decorated it to look more authentic. Isn't that nice? Anyway, so cruising speed is around 35 kilometers per hour. It takes a little while to get up to that sort of speed, but the nice thing is you can get up to it, and beyond it seems. Yeah, it was 40, wasn't it? Yeah, I said 40. Anyway, the gun is semi-stabilised, but that doesn't mean it is stabilised, so it'll be bouncing up and down and around all the time as you're moving along, especially with this suspension. This suspension is rather bouncy, as it was in real life, so you'll have a difficult time firing on the move. However, because it is semi-stabilised, when you come to a sudden stop, it'll more quickly pop onto target, and in reverse it should remain rather level. So there it is with it on, and let's see, what button did I use? Nope. U, P, I, O, Y, T, F, R. Ugh, I can't remember what button it was to turn off the stabilizer, but you don't need to know that, anyway. I mean, you're never going to turn off the stabilizer, so what's the point? The gun is okay. got a nice little puddle there. There's nice new graphics, isn't it? So yeah, M2A4, you should have no problems dealing with tanks like this. Provided, of course, that your shot does the damage it's supposed to do. Which it's not going to do. So you do kind of have to aim for crew members. There we go. Because don't forget, you've only got TNT inside of this high explosive anti-armor piercing shell. Heap. Okay. So it's not a very good explosive. Now I did say that this tank is very manoeuvrable, and it is. Look how manoeuvrable. That's in a higher gear, of course. If you do a neutral turn, it's a lot slower. Look how slow this is. Turret can't keep up, because it is a rather slow turning turret. I should probably have mentioned that in the technical description part. But there you go. Never mind, eh? Still turning. It's just as bad in reverse as well. And that's how slowly the turret turns. There are slower turrets, but there are of course faster turrets, much faster turrets, even at this sort of level. See, in reverse it turns just as slowly, doesn't it? You can see that now, because I'm demonstrating it to you. It does turn a little bit faster, I think, actually. That's interesting. And in reverse you get a speed of around 5 kilometers per hour, or 3 miles per hour, for those of us still using the imperial measurements. You see that one subscriber who said that I should use metric? Well, look what I'm doing. Metric all the way, baby. Until we get to one of the countries that uses imperial measurements. So I think that's how things are going to go here. It's my channel after all. So when we review British or American vehicles, we shall be using imperial measurements as the good Lord intended. Anyways, gun depression is fabulous. Check out that gun depression. Whoa, it's like minus 20 degrees almost. Maybe not quite that much, but still. That's one of the nice things about most of the Japanese tanks. Your gun depresses quite a lot. Gun elevation is not such an issue, but if you're going on a downward slope and you see, oh no, there's another enemy tank on the opposite side of the canyon, well, you might not be able to get the gun up all the way. It's okay, but could be better. Now, one problem that the Type 95 Hargo in real life encountered was that of Shermans. In that, this tank couldn't kill Shermans. Let's see if we can. Nope, because I can't hit. Oh, look, it went through the side. What about from the front? Can we do better than real-life Japanese people fighting in a real war in which they might have been killed? No. Seems as though I can't. Oh! Straight through the front, don't you know? I am invincible. Gun sight is only slightly offset from the main gun, so that's nice. I hate it when it's like up on a little periscope or off half a kilometre to the side. It's nice to be able to see the gun you're firing as you're firing it. So there it is off to the right there, and then I just fired it. And hey look, you can see the suspension is nicely modelled. If I can just turn the tank a little bit. There you can see the scissor type bogey suspension. Look at them pistoning their little crank rods and whatever bogey suspension does. Oh no, it's an M26 Pershing. Whatever am I to do? Right, so we've seen the turret rotation and the gun elevation and all that, but how good is the actual gun? I mean, it did kill a Sherman just then, but how quickly does it reload? Well, I'll show you. There, that's how quickly it reloads. It's pretty quick, isn't it? Considering it's got a one-man turret. French tanks must be very envious. Of course, they've got armour that I find it difficult to deal with in this tank. Coaxial machine gun? Well, not coaxial, but hull machine gun. Does have a nice new sound to it, but that's all the ammunition you get. It reloads very quickly, but you only get 20 round box magazines, which is abysmal. See, that's all the ammunition. That's an entire box magazine. The Americans get 250 round belts, even at this level. The British get 100 round belts for their Bisa machine guns. The French, Christ, I get wheel magazines. That was wheel, not real. I mean, they do get real magazines, as much as a magazine can be real in a game. Video game, don't you know? But still, they get 47 rounds of ammunition, I think, isn't it? But anyway, that's what it's like to drive. It's average, pretty much, apart from the armour, which is below average. It's an alright sort of tank. But don't just take my word for it. Well, take Battle Sukitolon. This is a word for it. We'll go see him now. Yeah. Right, so here we are in on the factory map. Luckily, it didn't take very many attempts to get a good video with the Type 95 Hara. Incidentally, if you hear any weird noises, that's because I forgot to turn off the microphone while recording this gameplay footage, so if you hear any dogs barking or me snuffling like an animal, that is the reason. It's because I didn't know I was being recorded. Anyways, so what we're going to do here? Well, there's only one capture point, and it's A, so I decide I'm not going to go that way. I'm not a battle tank, although I kind of am, but not really. I'm going to go and flank round. I'm going to go up towards the middle of the map and see if we can catch some bad guys off guard by shooting them in the side. And I pause, I look around like a meerkat. That's kind of how you have to be in this tank, like a meerkat. You don't have the armor to not be. So you have to be cautious, and you have to stop, and you have to listen, and you have to look around. Make sure there's nothing stalking you. Yes. Anyway, so we're going through these engine sheds. There's probably some baddies lurking around here somewhere. Being super careful, going around the corners. Oh, there's a Panzerjäger who's decided to join us. That's nice. He's going to go down around that side, the other side of the building. We're going to go around this way, because this is even more flanky. And careful around the corner. Nothing there. But oh ho! There's gaps in the fence. That means that something's come through here. Most likely a baddie. So we're going to have to be extra super careful. That means there's a enemy in our midst somewhere. I think that is a bad guy tank, but it turns out just to be a truck. And oh no! Oh, there's a French tank! And I hit him, but the shot doesn't go through, because it's a French tank. And his shot goes straight through, because it's a Japanese tank. Here we are in the valley, Kursk dried riverbed, whatever it's called. This one. And this is the one that sticks. Here you can see my brown camouflage. It's very nice, isn't it? Yes. I decorated it myself, don't you know? Anyway, so there's a Panzer II speeding off, and we're going to go and attack C. See what we can see around C. Following the road along here. Initially I think about going up on that ridge and shooting at whatever's coming down the other side, but then I decide that's a stupid idea. We don't have the gun, and we don't have the armor for that sort of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go be aggressive, don't you know? We're going to go up towards B, even though that's the most dangerous spot to be. That's where we're going to be. In B. So we're driving along, following this little track. There's a tree in the middle of the track, which means that this track isn't often used. Oh, I could be a detective, couldn't I? Anyway, having a little look around, making sure there's nothing moving. A little peek. Going up to these rocks, using them for cover. And pausing again, having a look around. Is there anything there? Doesn't look like it, so we're going to move forwards to the next piece of cover. And hey look, that little Panzer II's decided to help. And oh no, something's capping B. We're going to have to stop them. Back out of the way of this Panzer II's reversing. Don't want to get in his way. Then we go around. And I think there's something up there, yes. Ah, it's one of those big American amphibious things. I shoot him and I take out his commander. But it's not enough, and oh no, there's Tetrarch. I take out his commander. And I shoot... No, there's T-26 and I kill it. I got a kill in the Type 95. Granted, it was the T-26, but, you know, kill's the kill. Artillery takes out the Tetrarch. I get an assist for that because I'm so very helpful. And there is a Tetrarch right next to me. I don't know where that came from. Must have crawled up the hill. I didn't notice it, and was lucky that it didn't kill me. Anyway, so it looks relatively clear up there. We're gonna move forwards a little bit. There's a Panzer III eager to get on the cap point, and we're not gonna hold them up. So here we go. Driving across the bridge, the most dangerous part. Because anything in those bushes could be shooting, or looking and waiting for something to drive across the bridge. But luckily, it didn't. Now we get across and into the capture point, where there's already a bunch of Panzer II's. Looking up at the ridge line, making sure there's nothing sniping down at us. There's usually something up there, but today there isn't. The ammunition gets replenished very quickly in this tank, by the way. Did you see that? Very quickly indeed. Anyway, now we're going to go down this side because it's too dangerous on the other side. Everyone will be expecting us to drive across that second bridge, so what we're going to do is we're going to subvert their expectations and go under the bridge like a little troll. Yes. So we're going under the bridge, making sure there's nothing down here. Doesn't look like there's anything apart from spiders. Spiders don't worry us because we're in a tank. And oh, we're out in the open. There's something up on that road, but we can't see it. So we're going to drive across this field. This muddy field, and then oh no, something's attacking C. Well, we'll put a stop to that. You can mark my words. And what's that? Oh, it's Tetrarch! Oh, the shot goes into the track and doesn't do anything. But luckily the second shot goes straight through the driver's vision port. And takes out 2 of the 3 crew members. Oh no, there's a BT. My arch nemesis. We take him out from the side. Yes. You can have a BT all you like, but if you can't see me, then Hargo wins. Now there's something shooting up in those bushes over there, so I put a few shots into there, and muzzle flash. There's something behind that rock, but I can't see it. So my probing fire, quiet, doesn't hit anything. Now, I don't think there's anything down there on C. I think everything down there has been taken out, so I'm going to go and attack this thing that's up in the bushes. Oh, but wait! There's something down there after all. But I ignore him. I figured he's got enough on his plate without worrying about a little Hargo just driving nonchalantly up this hill. No need to pay attention to me. What could I possibly do? I'm just a little Japanese tank. Thing up on the ridge is still shooting at my buddies down in the valley. So we're gonna go behind him. I'm gonna catch him off guard. Yeah. Oh, but wait. That's a Char 1B. That's a very big, heavy armoured tank. And I don't think our gun can get through the armour. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna have to shoot the ventilation louver on the side. But I forget which side it's on! Oh no! I thought it was on this side, but it's not. It's just blank armour. And he's struggling to turn his turret round. We're trying to get behind him, but he's reversing too quickly. We can't do it. Curse this slow reverse speed. And then he pulls forwards and he uses the momentum to turn just enough. I tried to shoot his drive wheel, but it's not enough, and boom. Even a French gun can take out the Hara guy. So yes, not much else happens in this battle. I take out the IGO. Spoilers for this episode. I don't really manage to do anything in it though. I get taken out by my arch rival, the BT7 or BT5, wherever it is. There he is. Goes straight through the front of the armor. This armor's terrible. It just goes straight through. It doesn't stop anything. See, there's the shell. It goes through the front of the turret and kills everyone inside apart from one person. So then I fly our biplane friend from the last episode, and I spot that Char 90, no, that Char 2 bis. I drop bombs on him, but they don't do anything. I'm not quite accurate enough, so I decide to shoot him with my machine guns, so that other people can see him on the map. And hopefully do something about it. Shoot him with the turret. Yeah. It's not going to do anything to him. That's a big tank. But I can dream. And then, oh no, we're attacked by a biplane. 2 biplanes. And he's hit our engine. We're leaking oil all over the place. What is that? Is that a Fury? Anyway, we're doing a bit of ducking and weaving around the Fury. Because he's hit our engine, we're going a lot slower than normal. And he overshoots, and then we're on his tail. And he pulls up, but we manage to follow him and take him out. I shot down a plane in this thing. Wasn't that nice? And so there you have it, the Japanese Type 95 Hara. It's average, all round basically, apart from armour-wise, but then armour doesn't really do anything at this sort of level unless you're French. And this isn't French, so it doesn't have any armour. The gun is okay, penetration could be better, but it reloads relatively quickly and its shell does explode, sort of. Speed is average, manoeuvrability is good. It's an okay tank, not the best. It's better than the IGO though. Oops, spoilers for the next episode. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. And hopefully as well you'll join us for the next one. Well, we will be taking a little look at everyone's favourite Italian biplane, the Fiat CR32. Anyway, hopefully see you for that one, and thank you very much for very much for watching. Goodbye.